Okay, let's go straight for it. Character development in Simi. Oh no, let's go back a track. Plot agenda behind Simi. It's clearly a story about women and women's struggles. It even tells you a woman isn't born a woman, she becomes one. But somehow Simi avoids becoming claustrophobic, like some of the Black American style movies that, I don't want to name a few, but you can imagine what I'm saying. Somehow it manages to deal delicately with the issue of rape and some of the struggles a woman has when she's forced to have a child outside of wedlock and the shame associated with it, even when it's not her fault. It tackles the role of a mother in advising her daughter. It tackles the men, their response to such an individual, and sometimes the way men view women in a sort of generalized way. Somehow it manages to tackle all that very delicately. I remember I threw in some child molestation, which is a very delicate subject, but somehow again, Simi manages to pull it off. So I'm not entirely, saying it's done everything perfectly, but I think it's definitely began a good work, which I hope to, by highlighting it, encourage more filmmakers to pursue. So when you finish with the agenda, I think the agenda is well handled. You go to the character development. I do like the character of Simi and her mom and how they play off together. And later on, Simi and the lady I like to call her surrogate mom, Deji's mom. I think it's all very well done, and you get this feeling that they have spent lots of time together. There's a very natural way in which the acting comes across, even in the eye gestures. There's not this melodramatic style of the Nollywood cinemas we're used to. There is more of a subtlety in the way people communicate with their eyes. I like the character of Sade. I think she carries it off very well. She convinces you without being too pathetic, because a lot of times what undermines some of these roles of women, in a lot of these roles I should say, is that they come across as pathetic. They're just being humiliated time after time, and they just seem to be like footmats. So you don't get the impression that there could be any hope for them, or that even you would like to empathize with their situation. But here, Sade manages to convince you that here is a woman with a sense of self-worth, but who is clinging to some hope. And in the end, she still manages to find the strength of character to stand on her 2 feet. So all in all, I think there's enough that is progressive about women and the profile of women in Nigeria and in Africa really, and there's still enough that shows you what they're suffering and their vulnerability. Simi is a very, I would say, unique character in that she's ordinary in some ways and yet special in some other ways. She's ordinary in the sense that she's a village girl, but she's bright, and she's intelligent, she's beautiful, and yet not in the affected way in which a lot of the beauties they portray on Nollywood with the weave on and the Western affectations. She's a very natural babe, I should say. Maybe I should use the word babe for her, because she's actually she's portrayed as being a girl of virtue, which she's consistent throughout. I like the consistency in the way her character is developed, and I like the strength that comes through unexpectedly at moments when she's fighting for her son. And I like the reality of the ways the characters are dealt with. There's no polarized villain versus good person. You see a struggle, which is more realistic to the way life works. You see a struggle in the character of Simi's mom, whom I do like very much. You see a struggle in even Simi when she's making her decision as to whether to abort the child, and you see a genuine consideration of what it involves. You see struggles even with the character of what's his name, Efe. As bad as he is, he still manages to somehow show you a bit of you say something a bit more to him when he talks about what is it with women. There's something there that draws you in to try and see him as much more than a two-dimensional character. So there's so much I could say, but I want to say that there's a bit more depth in the way the characters are handled in Simi that I haven't seen in a lot of Nollywood movies, and I hope to see more of the same. Okay, let's move on swiftly then to the storyline. I think the storyline is handled very well, and I want to commend the story writer, because there's a way in which we're not being told the obvious. There's subtleties. I like the fact that even though Efe wouldn't go for IVF treatment, somehow it turned out we got the information about his being sterile when he was trying to adopt his son. So all that was all woven in a clever way, and life works like that. Things aren't so, laid out on a plate, so to speak, and that's how Simi allows you to flow through. You would never have expected that Simi would go to Lagos and lose her son and somehow still land on her feet. Perhaps you would never even have expected that she would try and marry the boy or trick him into marrying her. I hope not to give too much away, but some of the ways the story develops is unexpected, but yet is true to life, in the sense that we don't go and plan this story just for our own entertainment. It happens, and we just, as it were, struggle with some of the decisions we have made. And I find Simi very realistic to that extent. I'm glad there isn't too much repetition, but there is an element of the film and this probably goes to cinematic language, where there are lots of repeated shots of either Lagos or the village life, which I think we could do with less of that and just a more dynamic pace. But all in all, I think there's enough in the storyline to keep you engaged. And I actually cried on 2 occasions, and I found myself laughing and smiling. I was really drawn into the story, the characterization. And I think the cinematic language isn't trying to be too clever. So just to round up with that, it's simple, and I like the fact that it's set initially in the village of Abome. I like the simplicity of the camera positioning. It wasn't trying to do too many pans or anything like that, or all these fades. It kept it quite stark so you could appreciate the story and the characterization. And like I say, because the people spoke quite simply and came across quite straightforward, the camera style actually aided or framed it very well. I think some of the fact that it was set in Abome also endeared the film to me, because it reminded me of things Cocker had done, movies like that have that sort of raw authenticity. And that's what I would like to sort of say, that perhaps if we try less to emulate Western movies and stick with the things that work for us, we will discover perhaps a genuine African or even Nigerian expression of filmmaking. So let's take it that this is the genesis of something even more, would I say, a brighter future that awaits us. This is One Woman and Her Camera, signing out on Naija for Real. Thank you.